Western Mass News on ABC 40.
The Pentagon says it's sending more than $2 billion worth of air defense systems and ammunition to Ukraine. In a statement released today, it says the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative is funding that package. The Pentagon says that initiative gives it the authority to work with industry partners and also plans continue to provide more support for Ukraine down the line. Clues to solving mysterious long COVID cases could be in America's sewers. Scientists have been using wastewater samples to track community spread of the virus. During genetic sequencing of those samples, they have found dozens of unique strains of the coronavirus, along with multiple mutations in unusual combinations. The source of these mutated strains could be people who have been living with chronic or serious COVID-19 infections for years. One researcher says these people are shedding at least 1,000 times more virus than an average patient. Doctors believe the virus could be causing long-term damage to these patients, and they may not even know that they're infected. But health officials do not believe that these people pose a public health risk. The French president has been visiting the victims of a stabbing which took place at a children's playground. 4 toddlers and 2 adults were attacked on Thursday in the town of Annecy. Authorities say that a Syrian asylum seeker is accused of carrying out that assault. He was seen entering a playground with a knife and going after the children in their strollers. 2 children are still in critical condition following surgery.